The CEO was sweating bullets as Arab investors prepared to leave the failed meeting. But when the janitor with a toddler started translating flawlessly, he couldn't believe his luck. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Boston, 2008. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Amara Johnson wiped down the conference table, her movements methodical and efficient despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Thomson Technologies headquarters, the city glittered in the evening darkness, a stark contrast to the empty office she was cleaning. At 21, Amara's days started before dawn and ended well past midnight, dividing her time between her linguistics classes at the University of Massachusetts on scholarship and her job as a cleaner at the recently founded tech company. Her cleaning cart stood in the corner, products neatly arranged beside her well-worn linguistics textbooks. She glanced at her watch, 11:30. 2 more conference rooms to clean before she could head home to her tiny South End apartment, squeeze in 4 hours of sleep, and begin again tomorrow. The rhythm was punishing, but necessary. As a Brazilian immigrant on a student visa, her options were limited, and this job paid better than most would offer someone in her situation. "You're still here." The deep voice startled her, and she turned to find Michael Thompson standing in the doorway, his 6-foot frame leaning casually against the jamb. At 26, the newly minted Harvard graduate had inherited his family's wealth and connections to launch Thomson Technologies, already making waves in Boston's competitive tech scene. "Mr. Thompson," Amara straightened, instinctively tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm sorry. I didn't think anyone was still in the building." His eyes fell to the linguistics book peeking out from beside her cleaning supplies. "Studying while you work?" "Yes, sir. I have an exam tomorrow." Her English was excellent, though the soft lilt of her Portuguese accent remained. Michael walked in, picking up the textbook. "Advanced linguistic theory?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "That's not light reading. I'm on scholarship at UMass, linguistics with a focus on translation technologies." She reached for the book, but he held it a moment longer, studying her with newfound interest. "Coffee?" He gestured toward the executive kitchen across the hall. Amara hesitated. It was inappropriate, surely. She was the night cleaner. He was the CEO. Yet curiosity won out. "Just for a few minutes. I need to finish my rounds." In the sleek kitchen, Michael brewed espresso with practiced ease, asking about her studies while she perched uncomfortably on a high stool, still wearing her cleaner's uniform. "How many languages do you speak?" he asked, sliding a cup toward her. "4 fluently: Portuguese, English, Spanish, and French. I'm teaching myself Mandarin and Arabic now." She sipped the coffee, rich and expensive, unlike the instant brand she bought on sale. "Impressive." His eyes lingered on her face. "Most of my Harvard classmates struggled with basic Spanish requirements." For nearly an hour they discussed language, culture, and technology, Michael increasingly intrigued by her insights on how linguistic algorithms could improve translation software. When Amara finally glanced at her watch and jumped up, he seemed reluctant to end the conversation. "I need to finish cleaning," she said. "The morning staff arrives at 5. "Same time tomorrow?" Michael asked casually, though his eyes suggested it wasn't really a question. Over the following weeks, these late-night conversations became routine. Amara would clean the executive floor while Michael worked late, and then they'd share coffee and increasingly personal conversations. She learned about his traditional Boston family, the pressure of legacy, his ambitions for the company. He learned about her childhood in São Paulo, her mother who had sacrificed everything for her education, her dreams of revolutionizing language technology. "You're far too intelligent to be cleaning offices," he told her one night, watching as she organized her textbooks. "Intelligence doesn't change visa restrictions or pay tuition," she replied pragmatically. The first dinner invitation came a month later. "Let me take you somewhere nice tomorrow. Not here, not in uniform." Warning bells rang in Amara's mind, but she silenced them. Michael was different when they were alone. Thoughtful, curious, less the entitled heir, and more the ambitious entrepreneur. And she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach when he smiled. The restaurant in Back Bay was discreetly elegant, and Amara felt painfully out of place in her best dress, purchased second-hand and carefully altered. Michael, immaculate in his tailored suit, noticed her discomfort and ordered wine. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Stop worrying." By dessert, the wine and his attention had melted her nervousness. When his driver dropped her at her apartment building, Michael walked her to the door, his hand warm against her lower back. "This was just dinner," he said before she could speak. "Nothing more complicated than enjoying your company outside of that office." Yet 3 dinners later, when he kissed her in the back of his car, they both knew it had become something else entirely. His Beacon Hill apartment was a revelation. Soaring ceilings, original moldings, furniture that cost more than her annual tuition. The first night she stayed over, Amara woke at dawn, disoriented by the luxury surrounding her. "This is just fun, Amara," Michael said, watching her dress for her morning class. "We're from different worlds. You understand that, right?" She nodded, despite the small ache his words created. What else could it be? He was Michael Thompson, Boston Brahmin and rising tech entrepreneur. She was a scholarship student cleaning offices on a student visa. Yet as weeks became months, Amara allowed herself to hope. The way he held her in the darkness, the private jokes they shared, how he listened when she spoke of her dreams. Surely these meant something beyond just fun. Reality crashed back one morning when she missed her linguistics lecture, violently ill. The drugstore pregnancy test, then a second, then a third, displayed the same unmistakable result. Pregnant. For 3 days, Amara moved through her routine in a fog of panic. Her scholarship prohibited working more than 10 hours weekly, a rule she already violated with her cleaning job. Discovery would mean losing everything, and Michael had been clear about their relationship's boundaries. Still, she had to tell him. On a bitter December morning, Amara sat in a Starbucks on Commonwealth Avenue, hands trembling around her cup, the positive test in her purse feeling like a ticking bomb. When Michael entered, his usual confident stride was missing. He'd been distant recently, canceling their last 2 meetings with vague excuses about investor demands. Something had changed. She felt it before he even sat down. "I can't stay long," he said, remaining standing. "The board meeting starts in 30 minutes. Amara looked up at him, suddenly seeing him clearly, not the attentive man who discussed linguistics over late-night coffee, but the CEO in his Armani suit, checking his watch impatiently. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, tears threatening. "I thought you should know." Michael's face hardened, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "And what do you expect me to do with that information?" "I don't know. I thought maybe..." "Maybe what? That I'd marry you? An immigrant cleaner who barely speaks proper English?" Michael opened his Italian leather briefcase, removing a checkbook. "Some people are born to serve, others to lead. You would never be enough for the world I'm building." With calculated movements, he wrote out a check for $10,000. "To solve the problem," he explained, sliding it across the table. "Or for initial expenses if you decide to go through with it. But don't contact me again." "I don't want your money," Amara replied, dignity intact despite her crumbling world. "Be practical. You clean offices at night and can barely afford your rent in South End. What do you have to offer a child?" He stood, adjusting his Armani suit. "You'll never be more than disposable, Amara. Accept your position in life." That night, alone in her tiny apartment, Amara watched snow fall while caressing her still flat stomach. The university had already canceled her scholarship when they discovered she was working more hours than permitted for international students. Now, she was alone, pregnant, with only 3 months remaining on her student visa. The following weeks were brutal. The looks at work, the whispers when her pregnancy became visible. "The Latina who slept with the boss," they commented, thinking she couldn't understand their perfect English. Michael hired an external cleaning company, eliminating her position without ever facing her again. In her final month of pregnancy, Amara cleaned offices in 3 different buildings in the financial district, working until exhaustion. She slept only 4 hours nightly and studied obsessively during shift breaks. Her only advantage, her natural gift for languages. Beyond native Portuguese and fluent English, she mastered Spanish and French and was teaching herself Mandarin and Arabic. It was during a cleaning shift at Ellison International Trading that her life changed. The CEO, Eleanor Ellison, found Amara at 2 in the morning, instinctively translating a Mandarin conference call someone had accidentally left recording. "Where did you learn Mandarin?" Eleanor questioned, startling Amara. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "Your translation is perfect. Better than our contracted translator. Answer my question." "Self-taught," Amara responded. "I have a facility with languages." 3 days later, Amara gave birth to Zara Johnson. A week after that, she accepted a position as junior translator at Ellison, with flexible hours, a salary that tripled her previous earnings, and sponsorship for a work visa. In the maternity ward, looking at her daughter's tiny face, Amara made a promise. "Someday, Zara, we'll return to this city not as servants, but as leaders, and Michael Thompson will see exactly what he left behind." While cradling her newborn daughter in the hospital room, Amara couldn't imagine that 15 years later she would be returning to Boston not as a desperate immigrant, but as the billionaire CEO of a global empire, to confront the man who said she would never be enough. The promise Amara whispered to baby Zara in the hospital room felt hollow in the harsh light of the following months. Boston's winter was merciless, and her circumstances even more so. 3 weeks after giving birth, she was already back at work, her body still healing as she pushed a mop across the polished marble floors of the financial district's office buildings. "You can't bring a baby here," her supervisor at Metropolitan Cleaning Services had warned when she'd shown up with newborn Zara bundled against her chest. "It's against company policy." That night, Amara had sobbed while making desperate calls to every affordable daycare in South Boston. None would take an infant so young, especially not for the overnight hours she worked. By morning, she'd found her solution: an elderly Brazilian woman in her building who watched 3 other children during night shifts. The arrangement ate half of Amara's paycheck but left her no choice. Now, at 3 in the morning, Amara's exhausted body moved mechanically through the executive floor of Boston Capital Partners. Her breasts ached, heavy with milk, reminding her that in 4 hours she would need to rush home to feed Zara. The building's emptiness magnified every sound: the squeak of her cartwheels, the hum of the vacuum, her own ragged breathing as she fought to stay awake. The clock showed 3:45 when she reached the corner office. Inside, financial reports littered the massive desk, and a half-eaten sandwich sat forgotten beside an expensive fountain pen. Amara emptied the trash, wiped surfaces, and vacuumed methodically, just as she'd done in Michael's office months before. The memory ambushed her. Michael laughing at something she'd said, looking at her with interest that had seemed genuine. Had any of it been real? Or had she been nothing more than convenient entertainment, the cleaner with the exotic accent? "You'll never be more than disposable," his voice echoed in her mind. Amara's hands trembled as she arranged the desk items in perfect alignment. She was now cleaning 3 different buildings each night, working 12-hour shifts that left her with barely enough energy to care for Zara. Her student visa had expired 2 weeks ago, leaving her in immigration limbo while she waited for her pending asylum application to be processed. A long shot, but her only hope to stay in the country. By 6:30 in the morning, she was pushing through the door of her apartment, the cold having seeped into her bones during the long walk from the bus stop. Mrs. Oliveira, the elderly neighbor, dozed in Amara's only comfortable chair, while Zara slept in the second-hand bassinet beside her. "She was good," Mrs. Oliveira whispered, gathering her shawl. "Only cried once." After the woman left, Amara lifted her daughter, tears welling as the tiny girl instinctively rooted for her breast. "I'm sorry for leaving you," she murmured, settling into the chair. "But I promise it won't always be this way." Feeding Zara while simultaneously reading her linguistics textbook had become Amara's morning ritual. The university had revoked her scholarship, but she continued studying independently, determined not to lose the knowledge she'd worked so hard to gain. Her phone alarm would soon signal time for her second job, afternoon shifts at Café Brazil in Cambridge, where she served coffee and pastries to Harvard students who never looked her in the eye. "Você vai ter muito mais do que eu jamais tive," she promised Zara in Portuguese. "You will have much more than I ever had." The baby's eyes, so like her own, gazed up trustingly. At the cafe, Amara moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her accent deliberately thickened when it helped secure better tips from customers who found it charming. She absorbed conversations around her like a sponge, business terms from entrepreneurs having meetings, academic jargon from professors, slang from students. Each new expression was mentally catalogued, added to her growing language database. "More coffee, miss?" she asked a woman typing furiously on a MacBook. "Yes, and can you make it a pour-over this time? Your regular brew tastes burnt," the customer replied without looking up. "Of course," Amara smiled politely, though the woman wouldn't see it. As she prepared the special order, she listened to two business professors discussing market entry strategies for American companies in China. Their Mandarin pronunciation was atrocious, but the content was valuable. During her break, Amara huddled in the storage room with her Mandarin phrasebook, repeating words under her breath. She'd downloaded free language apps on her second-hand phone and utilized every spare moment, bus rides, customer lulls, even bathroom breaks, to practice. The evening shift at her third job, data entry for a small import company, was followed by another night of office cleaning. By the time she returned home the next morning, Amara could barely stand. Mrs. Oliveira looked at her with concern. "Você está se matando," the older woman chided. "You're killing yourself." "I have no choice," Amara replied, taking Zara into her arms. "That baby needs her mother alive," Mrs. Oliveira insisted before leaving. The calendar on Amara's wall displayed a red circle around a date 30 days away, her asylum interview. If denied, deportation would follow. She'd prepared her case meticulously, but knew the odds were against her. That night, after cleaning 2 floors of the Prudential Center offices, Amara sat on the subway heading to her next building. Her eyes burned with exhaustion, but she forced herself to review Arabic phrases on her phone. A businessman across from her stared openly at the screen. "That's a difficult language," he commented unexpectedly. "Business in the Middle East?" "Just learning," Amara replied cautiously. "Your pronunciation is quite good," he continued, switching to Arabic. Amara hesitated, then responded in the same language, careful with her intonation. The man's eyebrows rose in appreciation. "Self-taught?" he asked, returning to English. "Yes, I have facility with languages." He nodded, seemingly impressed, then returned to his newspaper. Amara felt a small glow of pride, her first genuine conversation in Arabic with a native speaker. 2 weeks before her asylum interview, disaster struck. Zara developed a high fever, her tiny body burning against Amara's chest. The emergency room visit consumed her entire savings and half of next month's rent money. The doctor prescribed antibiotics that cost nearly as much as her weekly food budget. "What choice do I have?" Amara whispered to a sleeping Zara that night, staring at their dwindling bank balance. She'd have to take extra cleaning shifts, meaning even less sleep. It was during one of these extra shifts at 2 in the morning in the Ellison International Trading offices that fate finally intervened. Amara was emptying trash bins in the conference room when she noticed a laptop left open, a recorded meeting still playing. The speakers discussed investment opportunities in Shanghai, alternating between English and Mandarin. Without thinking, Amara began translating the Mandarin portions aloud, correcting subtle contextual errors that the official translator had missed. So absorbed was she in the linguistic challenge that she didn't hear the office door open. "Where did you learn Mandarin?" The sharp question startled Amara so badly she dropped the trash bag. Eleanor Ellison, founder and CEO of Ellison International Trading, stood in the doorway, arms crossed. In her 60s, with steel gray hair and penetrating eyes, she was known as one of Boston's most formidable businesswomen. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have," Amara began, heart pounding with the certainty she'd be fired. "Your translation is perfect, better than our contracted translator," Eleanor interrupted, walking toward the laptop. "Answer my question." "Self-taught," Amara managed, her voice steady despite her fear. "I have a facility with languages." Eleanor studied her for a long moment. "How many languages do you speak?" "6, with varying proficiency," Amara replied. "Portuguese is my native language. I'm fluent in English, Spanish, and French. My Mandarin and Arabic are advancing quickly." "And you're working as a night cleaner?" Eleanor's tone suggested this was the most absurd thing she'd heard all year. "I have limited options due to my immigration status," Amara explained carefully. Eleanor nodded once. Decision made. "Come to my office tomorrow at noon. Don't clean it beforehand. I want to see if your other skills match your linguistic abilities." 3 days later, Amara was in labor at Boston Medical Center, Eleanor Ellison's business card still clutched in her hand. Between contractions, she worried about missing the opportunity, about the rent due in 10 days, about the asylum interview looming like a death sentence. When Zara Johnson entered the world 8 hours later, red-faced and screaming with impressive lung capacity, Amara forgot everything else. Holding her daughter's warm weight against her chest, she made a silent vow that this child would never know the desperation she had endured. "It's just us now," she whispered to the newborn. "But we will be enough." A week later, still recovering from childbirth and surviving on bare minimum sleep, Amara sat nervously in her tiny apartment, waiting for Eleanor Ellison. The CEO had insisted on coming to her when Amara explained she had a newborn and no childcare options. The knock came precisely at 10. Eleanor entered, surveying the impeccably clean but desperately small space with an unreadable expression. Her gaze lingered on Zara, asleep in her bassinet. "Your situation is more difficult than I anticipated," Eleanor stated bluntly, seating herself at Amara's wobbly table. "I manage," Amara replied with dignity. Eleanor placed a folder on the table. "Junior translator position, 60,000 annually to start. Flexible hours, health insurance, childcare assistance, and," she paused significantly, "sponsorship for a work visa." Amara stared at the document, certain she'd misheard. "Why would you do this for me?" "I recognize exceptional talent when I see it," Eleanor replied matter-of-factly. "And I know what it's like to fight to prove your worth in a world that underestimates you." As Eleanor outlined the position details, Amara fought to maintain composure. This wasn't charity. It was recognition of her abilities, something Michael Thompson had been too blinded by prejudice to see. "We begin next Monday," Eleanor concluded, standing to leave. "My driver will collect you at 8. After the door closed, Amara lifted Zara from her bassinet, tears falling freely. "See?" she whispered to her sleeping daughter. "I told you we would be enough." While Eleanor reviewed the employment contract, Amara couldn't possibly foresee that in less than a decade the Transcend would be valued in billions, and that Michael Thompson's company would be begging to be considered worthy of a partnership. While Eleanor reviewed the employment contract, Amara couldn't possibly foresee that in less than a decade the Transcend would be valued in billions, and that Michael Thompson's company would be begging to be considered worthy of a partnership. 3 days after giving birth to Zara, Amara stood in the sterile hospital room, her daughter cradled against her chest. Outside the window, Boston's skyline stretched into the distance, the Thompson Technologies building barely visible among taller skyscrapers. A nurse entered with discharge papers, eyeing Amara with thinly veiled concern. "Is someone coming to take you home?" the nurse asked, glancing around the empty room. "Yes," Amara lied, signing the forms with her free hand. "My friend is waiting downstairs." In truth, she would be taking the bus, her cleaning uniform stuffed in the small bag containing her meager possessions. As she navigated the hospital exit, Zara bundled against the January chill. Amara whispered a promise that resonated deeper than any prayer. "One day, Zara, we will return to this city not as servants but as leaders, and Michael Thompson will see exactly what he left behind." 1 week later, with Eleanor Ellison's business card still clutched in her hand like a talisman, Amara entered the imposing granite building housing Ellison International Trading. Her body still ached from childbirth, her mind clouded from sleepless nights with a newborn, but her spine remained straight as she approached the reception desk. "I have an appointment with Ms. Ellison," she stated, her voice steadier than her nerves. Minutes later, she sat across from Eleanor in a corner office overlooking the harbor, Zara sleeping in a carrier beside her. The contrast between this meeting and her last encounter with Michael couldn't have been starker. Where he had remained standing, Eleanor had offered her tea. Where he had spoken of her disposability, Eleanor discussed her potential. "Your language skills are exceptional," Eleanor said, reviewing Amara's hastily assembled resume. "But I need to know if you're willing to work harder than you've ever worked before." "With respect, Ms. Ellison, I've been working 3 jobs while pregnant and studying languages in whatever minutes remained," Amara replied. "Hard work doesn't frighten me." Eleanor's lips quirked in what might have been appreciation. "Then let's discuss your future." That afternoon, Amara left the building with a contract offering a position as junior translator, a salary that dwarfed her previous earnings combined, and something even more precious, a path to legal residency through company sponsorship. In her tiny apartment that evening, she cried for the first time since Michael's rejection, but these were different tears entirely. The following months transformed Amara's life in ways she could scarcely comprehend. While other junior employees complained about early mornings, she arrived first, having already fed and settled Zara at the company's on-site daycare, a benefit Eleanor had implemented specifically after hiring her. Nights of cleaning had conditioned Amara to function on minimal sleep, giving her an edge that quickly distinguished her from peers. Her first major assignment came 3 months into her employment. A delegation of Chinese investors was visiting, and the company's senior Mandarin translator had fallen ill. Eleanor appeared at Amara's desk, her expression unreadable. "How confident are you in your Mandarin?" she asked without preamble. Amara considered the question carefully. "My vocabulary is strongest in business and technology terms. My accent needs work, but my comprehension is excellent." "Good enough. You're translating for the meeting in 30 minutes. The conference room intimidated with its mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows, but Amara focused solely on the task at hand. As the Chinese businessmen entered, she greeted them in carefully practiced Mandarin, earning surprised looks and respectful nods. Throughout the 3-hour negotiation, Amara translated with increasing confidence, occasionally catching subtle cultural references that might have derailed the conversation. When one investor made a joke about Boston Harbor tea that confused the Americans, Amara smoothly contextualized the historical reference while maintaining the humorous intent. Afterward, Eleanor simply nodded, her equivalent of effusive praise, and by week's end, Amara's salary had increased by 15%. As Zara grew from infant to toddler, Amara developed a system that maximized every hour. She recorded language lessons to listen to during her commute. She practiced Arabic while bathing Zara, turning language drills into games that made her daughter giggle. She studied translation technology research papers during lunch breaks, developing theories about combining artificial intelligence with human cultural insight. On Zara's first birthday, Eleanor invited them to dinner at her Beacon Hill home, a gesture unprecedented among junior employees. Over a meal that cost more than Amara's former weekly salary, Eleanor revealed glimpses of her own struggle as one of Boston's first female financial executives in the 1970s. Men expected me to serve coffee in meetings where I was actually the highest-ranking person present, she recalled, swirling expensive scotch in a crystal glass. So I understand something about being underestimated. Did it make you angry? Amara asked, thinking of Michael's dismissive words. Anger is useful only when transformed into strategy, Eleanor replied, her gaze sharp. I didn't waste energy being offended. I used it to build something they couldn't ignore. The lesson lodged in Amara's mind, reshaping her approach to the past. Michael's rejection transformed from an open wound to fuel for her ambition. She didn't need to prove him wrong. She needed to build something so significant that his opinion became irrelevant. By her second year at Ellison, Amara had been promoted to senior translator, specializing in complex negotiations requiring cultural finesse beyond mere language skills. Her reputation for salvaging delicate international deals spread throughout the company. Executives began requesting her specifically, noting how her insights often prevented misunderstandings that could have cost millions. One evening, working late after putting Zara to bed in the company's family room, another accommodation Eleanor had quietly arranged, Amara noticed a pattern in the translation errors that frequently complicated negotiations. Cultural context, not vocabulary, caused the most significant problems. Even the best translators sometimes missed idioms, cultural references, or subtle business customs that varied between countries. For weeks, she developed a framework for a new approach to translation services, one that combined technological efficiency with cultural intelligence. She created flowcharts, researched machine learning capabilities, and drafted business models until dawn hours, her small apartment walls covered with notes and diagrams. When she finally requested a meeting with Eleanor to present her ideas, Amara had worked at Ellison for nearly 3 years. Zara, now a precocious toddler, had begun showing remarkable linguistic abilities herself, absorbing Spanish from daycare workers and mimicking Mandarin phrases she heard her mother practice. "You have 15 minutes," Eleanor said as Amara entered her office, presentation materials clutched nervously in hand. Amara spoke with the passion of absolute conviction. Traditional translation services fail because they focus solely on language, not cultural context. Machines can translate words but miss cultural nuances that make or break international deals. She outlined her vision for a new division within Ellison, one that would provide not just linguistic translation, but comprehensive cultural interpretation for high-stakes business negotiations. "We wouldn't be selling translation, we'd be selling understanding," she concluded, slightly breathless from the rush of presenting her complete vision. Eleanor remained silent for several long moments, studying Amara with an intensity that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Finally, she pressed the intercom on her desk. "Cancel my afternoon appointments," she instructed her assistant. Then, to Amara, "Start again from the beginning. Show me the market analysis." By evening, they had moved from Eleanor's office to the conference room, walls now covered with Amara's research and projections. Eleanor challenged every assumption, demanded evidence for each claim, and forced Amara to defend her vision with increasing precision. "This isn't just a new service," Eleanor said finally, surveying the comprehensive strategy they had refined together. "This is an entirely new company." Amara's heart sank, assuming Eleanor meant the idea was too ambitious. "I understand if it's beyond Ellison's current scope." "I'm not dismissing it," Eleanor interrupted. "I'm saying this deserves to be its own entity. A partnership between us." That night, carrying a sleeping Zara to their apartment, Amara felt a shift in the universe, as though some cosmic scale had finally begun to balance. In 3 years, she had progressed from cleaning offices to potentially co-founding a company with one of Boston's most respected businesswomen. As she tucked Zara into bed, Amara thought fleetingly of Michael Thompson. His company had received positive press recently for technological innovations, though nothing that approached the vision she and Eleanor had outlined today. The thought brought no pain, only a distant acknowledgement that their paths were now irreversibly divergent. 6 months later, Ellison Johnson Translations launched with Amara as Chief Operating Officer, overseeing a team of 12 specialized translators and 3 technology developers. Their first major client, a Japanese technology conglomerate negotiating with American healthcare providers, reported that Amara's cultural insights had salvaged a deal worth over $30 million. On the company's letterhead, Amara's name appeared not as Amara Johnson, but as Amara Jenkins, her maternal grandmother's surname, adopted professionally to mark her transformation from the desperate immigrant Michael had discarded to the rising executive now featured in Boston's business publications. While redesigning the company logo one evening, Zara playing contentedly beside her desk, Amara couldn't possibly imagine that in less than a decade the Transcend would be valued in billions, and that Thomson Technologies would be begging to be considered worthy of a partnership. While redesigning the company logo one evening, Zara playing contentedly beside her desk, Amara couldn't possibly imagine that in less than a decade the Transcend would be valued in billions, and that Thomson Technologies would be begging to be considered worthy of a partnership. 5 years passed like the turning of seasons, swift yet profound in their transformation. Boston's skyline remained unchanged, but Amara Jenkins had metamorphosed entirely. At 26, she stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Ellison Johnson Translations headquarters, watching morning light spill across the harbor. Behind her, a 5-year-old Zara sat cross-legged on the office's plush carpet, simultaneously coloring and chatting in flawless Spanish with Maria, the receptionist. "Buenos días, señora María. ¿Te gusta mi dibujo?" Zara held up her artwork, a surprisingly detailed rendering of what appeared to be a global map. "Es hermoso, pequeña," Maria replied, genuinely impressed. "Your mother has taught you well." "Actually," Amara interjected, turning from the window with a proud smile, "she learned Spanish from you and the daycare staff. Zara absorbs languages like a sponge." This was an understatement. At 5, Zara already spoke English, Portuguese, Spanish, and French with native-level fluency and was beginning to mimic the Mandarin phrases she heard during her mother's business calls. Her gift for languages seemed to surpass even Amara's natural talent, a fact that filled her mother with both pride and quiet vindication. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Jenkins, the Japanese delegation has arrived. They're waiting in conference room A." Amara straightened her tailored navy suit, a far cry from the second-hand clothes of her cleaning days. "Tell them I'll be right there." She knelt beside Zara. "Mama has an important meeting. Stay with Maria, okay?" Zara nodded solemnly. "Ganbata, Mama," she offered in perfect Japanese. "Good luck." The transformation from night cleaner to executive hadn't happened overnight. Each step had been deliberate, each success hard-won. Eleanor had been both mentor and taskmaster, pushing Amara beyond what she thought possible. In conference room A, 6 Japanese executives rose as Amara entered. She bowed precisely, not too deep, not too shallow, and greeted them in Japanese without a translator present. Their surprise quickly gave way to appreciation as she navigated the complex etiquette of business Japanese with practiced ease. "Jenkins-san," the lead executive said after 2 hours of negotiation, "your understanding of our cultural concerns is unprecedented. Most American companies miss these nuances entirely." "That's precisely why Ellison Johnson exists," Amara replied. "Words are only the beginning of true communication." Later that afternoon, Eleanor found Amara in her office reviewing the finalized contract. Zara had fallen asleep on the small sofa Amara had installed specifically for such occasions. "Takeda signed," Eleanor stated, satisfaction evident in her typically reserved demeanor. $7 million, with options to expand next quarter. "Their legal team was impressed with our cultural contingency clauses," Amara nodded. "They've had translation disasters with other partners." Eleanor settled into a chair, studying Amara with the analytical gaze that had intimidated generations of business rivals. "You need to change your wardrobe." Amara blinked at the non sequitur. "Excuse me?" "Your suits are adequate but not exceptional. In our world, appearance is currency." Eleanor's tone was matter-of-fact. "Tomorrow, you're meeting my tailor. You represent this company. Dress accordingly." It was classic Eleanor, abrupt, demanding, but ultimately supportive. The next day, Amara found herself being measured for custom suits at a discreet atelier in Back Bay, where Boston's elite had their wardrobes crafted for generations. "These will be your armor," Eleanor explained as the tailor pinned expensive Italian wool. "Never demonstrate insecurity. They can smell weakness like sharks scent blood." The lessons continued beyond clothing. Eleanor coached Amara through the unwritten rules of Boston's business elite, which invitations mattered, whose opinions carried weight, how to navigate the complex social hierarchies that often determined business success more than actual competence. "Always remember," Eleanor advised during one such lesson, "in these circles, confidence isn't arrogance, it's the admission price." 3 months later, Amara stood before a gathering of Pentagon officials, presenting Ellison Johnson's proposal for handling classified diplomatic translations. Her tailor-made suit fit impeccably, her presentation materials were flawless, and her confidence was absolute. "Our proprietary cultural context algorithms reduce misinterpretation by 63% compared to standard translation services," she explained. Her former accent now smoothed into a cultured international lilt. "For sensitive diplomatic communications, this difference isn't merely beneficial, it's critical." When the Pentagon contract was awarded, Ellison Johnson's first major government deal, Eleanor took Amara to dinner at Boston's most exclusive restaurant. As champagne was poured, Eleanor raised her glass. "To Ms. Jenkins and her remarkable vision," she toasted. Amara smiled at the use of her professional name. She had adopted the Jenkins surname 6 months earlier, taking her maternal grandmother's name as a symbol of her new identity. The first time a client had addressed her as Ms. Jenkins, she had responded without hesitation, embracing the persona she was carefully crafting, one that bore no visible connection to the cleaning girl Michael Thompson had discarded. "If Michael could see you now, Miss Jenkins," Eleanor mused, a rare moment of personal observation. Amara raised an eyebrow. "Who is Michael?" she replied, and both women laughed at their shared understanding. The joke carried truth. In 5 years, Amara had methodically rebuilt herself from foundation to facade. The frightened immigrant cleaning offices at midnight had vanished, replaced by a poised executive whose cultural insights were now sought by government agencies and Fortune 500 companies alike. Yet some things remained unchanged, her devotion to Zara chief among them. Despite her grueling schedule, Amara structured her life around her daughter, bringing her to international business trips and arranging meetings around school events. Zara had grown into a precocious, confident child who moved comfortably between cultures and languages. One evening, as they shared dinner in their new apartment, a spacious 3-bedroom in a prestigious building, worlds away from the tiny South End unit they'd once occupied, Zara asked the question Amara had been anticipating for years. "Mama," she began, pushing rice around her plate thoughtfully. "Sophia at school says everyone has a daddy. The other kids have daddies. Do I have one?" Amara set down her fork, giving the question the respect it deserved. "Yes," she answered truthfully. "You have a biological father, but he chose not to be part of our lives." "Why?" Zara's eyes, so like Amara's own, were curious but not sad. "He made a decision based on what he thought was important," Amara explained carefully. "Some people aren't ready to be parents. But you have me, and we have each other. We're a complete family just as we are." Zara considered this, then nodded with the pragmatism of a 5-year-old. "Okay, can I have ice cream?" The simplicity of her acceptance brought unexpected tears to Amara's eyes, blinked away before Zara could notice. Her daughter had never known lack or abandonment, only security and love. This, perhaps, was Amara's greatest triumph. 6 months later, Amara received her first feature in a major business publication, Revolution in Translation: How an Immigrant is Transforming Global Communications. The article detailed Ellison Johnson's meteoric rise and innovative approach, with Amara's portrait, confident, elegant, commanding, occupying a full page. She kept a copy on her desk, not from vanity, but as a milestone marker. When clients or competitors entered her office, the magazine served as a subtle reminder of her ascent. Occasionally, she wondered if Michael ever saw such articles, if he ever connected Amara Jenkins, rising executive, with the pregnant cleaner he had dismissed as dispensable. On the 7th anniversary of Ellison Johnson's founding, Eleanor called Amara into her office. The older woman looked uncharacteristically reflective, gazing out at the Boston skyline that had witnessed her own remarkable career. "I'm retiring," she announced without preamble. "I've built this for 40 years. Now it's your turn to take it forward." Amara sat perfectly still, absorbing the seismic implications. "You're selling your shares?" "To you," Eleanor confirmed. "We'll structure it as a 5-year buyout. The board approves. They know you're the future of this company." The negotiation for Eleanor's stake was both emotional and meticulous. As they finalized terms, Eleanor placed her hand over Amara's, a rare physical gesture from the typically reserved businesswoman. "You're the daughter I never had, Amara," she said quietly. "What you've built here exceeds anything I could have envisioned." Later that night, with tears in her eyes, Amara signed the documents that would make her majority owner of the company. As she wrote her signature, a vision crystallized, not just of continuing Eleanor's legacy, but of expanding it into something truly revolutionary. "Transcend Translations," she murmured, testing the name that had been forming in her mind, our vision transcending boundaries. The next morning, she held her new business card, the redesigned logo gleaming in embossed silver. Amara Jenkins, CEO and proprietor, Transcend Translations. While redesigning the company logo, Amara couldn't imagine that in less than a decade the Transcend would be valued in billions, and that Thomson Technologies would be begging to be considered worthy of a partnership. While redesigning the company logo, Amara couldn't imagine that in less than a decade the Transcend would be valued in billions, and that Thomson Technologies would be begging to be considered worthy of a partnership. 3 years later, Amara stood in the control room of Transcend Translations headquarters, surveying the futuristic array of monitors displaying simultaneous translations in 12 different languages. At 29, she had transformed the company she'd inherited from Eleanor into something entirely new, a technological powerhouse that was redefining global communication. "The Arabic translation is half a second delayed," she noted, pointing to the third screen from the left. "That could be critical during the Saudi minister's speech tomorrow." Her chief technology officer nodded, fingers flying across his keyboard. Adjusting the neural network parameters now, the cultural context algorithm needed recalibration for regional dialects. This was the heart of Transcend's revolutionary approach, the seamless integration of cutting-edge AI with human cultural intelligence. While competitors relied on either pure technology or human translators, Amara had built a system that leveraged both, creating translations that preserved not just words, but cultural meaning. "I don't want just correct translations," Amara explained to her development team during their afternoon meeting. "I want translations that understand the unspoken, the cultural implications, the historical contexts that change how words are received." Around the conference table sat her diverse team, 15 linguists representing different nationalities, collaborating with programmers from MIT, Stanford, and foreign technical universities. This diversity wasn't just for show, it was Transcend's competitive advantage, allowing them to catch cultural nuances that homogeneous teams routinely missed. The Saudi government contract depends on our ability to navigate tribal sensitivities in diplomatic communications, Amara continued. Their previous translation service created an international incident by missing a historical reference to the Treaty of Jeddah. As the meeting progressed to technical specifications, a small whirlwind burst through the door. Zara, now 8 years old, returning from her advanced mathematics program at Boston University. "Mama, look!" she exclaimed, waving a paper covered in equations. "I figured out how to make the algorithm more efficient." The senior programmer, a former Google engineer with 3 PhDs, accepted the paper with amused tolerance that quickly transformed to shock. This actually works," he muttered, scanning the childish handwriting containing surprisingly sophisticated mathematics. "She's simplified our backpropagation model by nearly 30%. Amara wasn't surprised. Zara's mathematical abilities had emerged alongside her linguistic talents, creating a mind uniquely suited to computational linguistics. While other children played video games, Zara designed language processing algorithms for fun. "We'll test it tomorrow," Amara promised, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Now, homework first, then dinner." Later that evening, after Zara had gone to bed, Amara sat in her home office reviewing industry reports. A headline caught her eye. "Thomson Technologies announces Linguistic Services Division." She clicked on the article, her expression remaining carefully neutral as she read Michael Thompson's announcement of expansion into AI-powered translation services. The article quoted Michael, "Thomson Technologies is uniquely positioned to revolutionize machine translation with our proprietary algorithms. No company understands the intersection of technology and communication better." Amara closed the article without reaction. This wasn't the first time she'd monitored Thomson Technologies' movements, not from emotional attachment, but from strategic necessity. She understood the competitive landscape, and Michael's company was still a significant player despite recent setbacks. Her phone rang. Her head of talent acquisition. "Sorry to call so late, but Thomson's headhunters are approaching our lead Arabic specialist with a significant offer." "Double it," Amara replied without hesitation, "and secure exclusivity for 3 years. We need him for the Saudi contract." This was the invisible chess match she'd been playing for years, anticipating Michael's moves, blocking his expansion into her territory without ever directly confronting him. When Thomson Technologies attempted to enter the diplomatic translation space, Transcend had already secured the major government contracts. When they targeted Asian markets, Amara had already established exclusive partnerships throughout the region. A week later, Amara stepped off her company's private jet in Dubai, preparing for negotiations with the United Arab Emirates' largest technology conglomerate. The deal would give Transcend exclusive rights to provide translation services for the Gulf Cooperation Council, effectively locking Thomson Technologies out of the entire region. "Ms. Jenkins, your reputation precedes you," Sheikh Al Maktoum greeted her in the opulent conference room. "They say you speak our language not just with your tongue, but with your understanding." Amara responded in fluent Arabic, with precisely the right dialectical nuances for an Emirati businessman of his standing. By the end of the 3-hour meeting, the sheikh was not just a client, but an advocate, promising to personally recommend Transcend to his connections throughout the Middle East. On the flight home, Amara reviewed reports from her intelligence team. Thomson Technologies had lost its bid for the UAE contract, the latest in a series of setbacks that had caused their stock to drop 8% in the last quarter. The rational part of her acknowledged this as simple business competition. The part that remembered sitting in a Starbucks, pregnant and abandoned, felt something more complex. When she arrived home, Zara was waiting with an unexpected question. She held up her tablet, displaying a photo she'd found online, Michael Thompson accepting an award at a technology conference. "He looks like me, doesn't he?" Zara asked, her intelligent eyes studying the image. Amara looked at the photo. The same jawline, the same arch of the eyebrows that she saw in her daughter every day. "Genetically, yes," she answered carefully. "In all the ways that matter, You're uniquely yourself." Zara nodded, her analytical mind processing this as she would any other data point. At 8, she understood more than most adults about genetics and inheritance, having already taken college-level biology classes. "I calculated the statistical probability," she said matter-of-factly. "Based on facial recognition algorithms, there's a 91.3% chance he's my biological father." Amara smiled despite herself. Only her daughter would approach this question with mathematical precision. "Yes, he is. But family is about who loves you, not just DNA." "I know," Zara replied, already moving on to her next thought. "His company's translation algorithms are inefficient. They're using outdated neural network architecture." The following month, Amara faced the most significant decision in Transcend's expansion. A major multinational corporation had offered $150 million to acquire the company, a sum that would have seemed unimaginable just a few years earlier. The executives sat in Transcend's luxurious boardroom, their offer displayed on the presentation screen. "This represents a premium of 40% over current market valuation," their lead negotiator explained. "A tremendous opportunity for all shareholders." Amara listened politely, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. When they finished, she smiled with practiced warmth that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I appreciate your interest in Transcend," she replied, "but we're just beginning our journey. Our market penetration is only at 8% of potential, and our new cultural contextual AI launching next quarter will redefine industry standards." The executives exchanged glances. "Perhaps we could revisit the valuation." "This isn't about the number," Amara interrupted gently. "It's about vision. Transcend isn't for sale at any price. Not now." After they departed, her CFO approached cautiously. "That was a generous offer. The board will have questions." "The board will understand when they see next quarter's projections," Amara replied confidently. "Prepare the data for the technology conference in Singapore. We're unveiling the simultaneous cultural translation system there." 2 weeks later, Amara stood on stage at the Global Technology Forum, presenting Transcend's revolutionary system to an audience of industry leaders and international media. The demonstration was flawless. 12 languages translated simultaneously, with cultural nuances preserved across all communication channels. The following day, the Wall Street Journal headline read, "Transcend redefines global communication. Thompson loses ground." The article detailed how Transcend's innovation had rendered competing systems effectively obsolete, with specific mention of Thomson Technologies' recent failed attempts to enter the market. That evening, reading the coverage in her hotel suite, Amara allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Not vindication. She had moved beyond needing that, but acknowledgement of how far she had come from the night cleaner whose dreams had seemed impossible. Her phone chimed with a message from Zara, who was staying with Eleanor during her mother's business trip. "Mom, Harvard's Advanced Mathematics Department wants to discuss early admission options. Also, I improved your cultural algorithm by 8%. Check your email." Amara smiled. Every step forward was not just her victory, but her daughter's future. That thought sustained her more than any business success ever could. While declining the acquisition offer, Amara didn't know that in 5 years her company would be worth 25 times more, and that her next acquisition would be precisely Michael Thompson's crumbling empire. While declining the acquisition offer, Amara didn't know that in 5 years her company would be worth 25 times more, and that her next acquisition would be precisely Michael Thompson's crumbling empire. 4 years passed with the momentum of a well-crafted business plan executed to perfection. Amara Jenkins, now 33, stood at the panoramic windows of her Manhattan penthouse, watching dawn break over the city while simultaneously preparing breakfast for Zara and conducting a video conference in flawless Japanese. The sleek, minimalist kitchen, all white marble and brushed steel, contrasted sharply with the cramped South End apartment where she had once struggled to heat formula between cleaning shifts. The Osaka contract requires cultural sensitivity regarding their hierarchical structure, Amara explained, whisking eggs with one hand while gesturing with the other. Their CEO may say yes verbally while meaning no contextually. On the screen, her Tokyo team nodded in understanding. Amara had built her empire on precisely this insight, that true communication transcended mere words. "Mom, the derivative function in this equation doesn't account for statistical variance," Zara interrupted, pushing a notebook across the counter. At 12, her mathematical abilities had long since outpaced what even advanced tutors could provide. Amara smoothly transitioned between mother and CEO roles, reviewing Zara's complex calculations while continuing her business directives without missing a beat. "Add a confidence interval of 95%, she suggested to her daughter, then returned to her Japanese colleagues. "Send the revised cultural briefing before their morning meetings tomorrow." The seamless integration of her dual roles defined Amara's life. Where other executives separated family and business, she had created a unified existence where each dimension strengthened the other. Transcend Translations now employed 2,800 people across 18 countries, with revenues exceeding $600 million annually. The company valuation had recently crossed the $2 billion mark, making Amara one of the rare self-made female billionaires in America. "Your car is waiting, Ms. Jenkins," announced the discreet voice of her house system. "Traffic indicates an 18-minute delay to headquarters." Downstairs, her driver waited beside a sleek black Mercedes. The morning routine proceeded with military precision, Zara reviewing advanced calculus problems, while Amara simultaneously signed off on acquisition paperwork and refined points for her afternoon presentation to the United Nations Diplomatic Corps. The Transcend headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming midtown tower, its reception area a testament to Amara's vision. 10 receptionists, each speaking different languages, greeted visitors beneath the company's slogan illuminated in brushed platinum: "Understanding cultures, connecting worlds." The Saudi prince confirmed for 3 o'clock, her chief of staff reported as Amara swept through the executive floor. "The Chinese delegation requires your presence at the contract signing at 4:15, and the Russian ambassador requested a private consultation regarding their nuclear treaty translation protocols." In the command center, a state-of-the-art room monitoring global translation operations, Amara moved between stations with practiced ease, making split-second decisions in multiple languages. One moment she was correcting a subtle mistranslation in Farsi diplomatic communications, the next approving cultural context algorithms for a Japanese corporate merger. "The Moscow feed is experiencing cultural desynchronization," called an analyst from across the room. Amara switched instantly to Russian, identifying the problem with the precision that had become her trademark. "The algorithm isn't recognizing the historical context of the treaty language. Implement Cultural Overlay Protocol 7. A text message illuminated her phone. Zara's school calling about a mathematics competition. Without hesitation, Amara instructed her assistant to reschedule a meeting with the French ambassador. Some things took precedence even over diplomatic relations. 3 hours later, she sat in an auditorium watching Zara solve complex equations against competitors twice her age. The girl's confidence, the easy certainty with which she approached problems others found insurmountable, filled Amara with quiet pride. This was her true legacy, not the billions or the global influence, but this remarkable child who moved through the world unencumbered by the doubts that had once plagued her mother. "She's extraordinary," whispered the competition judge after Zara's flawless presentation. "MIT is already expressing interest." "She'll make her own choices when she's ready," Amara replied, protective of her daughter's agency in a way no one had been for her. That evening, a Fortune magazine interviewer sat across from Amara in her executive office, surrounded by awards and international art collected during her global business travels. "The question our readers most want answered," the journalist began, tapping her recorder, is how you balance being a global CEO with single motherhood. Most executives in your position have stay-at-home spouses or barely see their children. Amara's smile was genuine but measured. I don't balance them. I integrate them. Separation creates conflict. Integration creates harmony. My daughter doesn't compete with my company for attention. They're different expressions of the same purpose. And what purpose is that? The journalist pressed. Creating a world where potential isn't limited by circumstance, Amara replied, thinking of the night cleaner she had once been. Later that week, Amara accepted a dinner invitation from François Beaulieu, the French ambassador to the United Nations. At 45, François embodied diplomatic elegance, cultured, sophisticated, with the confident charm of a man accustomed to moving in rarefied circles. "You're the most fascinating person I've met in New York," he told her over candlelight at Le Bernardin, the city's most exclusive French restaurant. "A self-made billionaire who speaks 9 languages and still attends her daughter's school events." Amara smiled, appreciating his charm while discreetly checking emails between courses. "Fascination often fades upon closer inspection, Ambassador." "François, please," he corrected, refilling her wine glass. "And I suspect you become more rather than less interesting with acquaintance." For the first time in years, Amara allowed herself to consider a personal connection. François was intelligent, respected in his field, and understood the demands of international work. Their subsequent dates were pleasant: diplomatic receptions, private gallery viewings, quiet dinners at exclusive restaurants. Yet something essential was missing. 3 months into their relationship, François gently confronted the truth over dessert at his Upper East Side apartment. "You love your empire more than you could love any person," he observed without rancor. "This isn't criticism, merely observation." Amara didn't deny it. "My company isn't just business. It's the future I'm building for my daughter and for all the other young women told they'll never be enough." The separation was amicable, their last kiss containing mutual respect rather than regret. François understood what many men never would, that Amara's heart belonged first to her vision, with little space remaining for romantic distractions. That evening, reviewing financial reports in her home office, Amara noticed a business headline: "Thomson Technologies announces 3rd restructuring in 2 years." The article detailed declining market share, failed product launches, and rumors of liquidity problems at Michael's company. Her senior vice president of acquisitions had suggested months earlier that Thomson Technologies could be purchased for a fraction of its former value. "The technology still has merit," he'd argued. "Their translation division is failing because they lack your cultural insight, not because the core programming is flawed." "Not yet," Amara had replied thoughtfully. "Timing is everything in acquisitions and in reckonings." She closed the article without emotion. Michael's company problems weren't personal satisfaction, merely market reality. The man who had once dismissed her as dispensable was proving himself disposable in the market he had thought he would dominate. 2 weeks later, Zara burst into Amara's home office, clutching an official-looking envelope. "Harvard accepted me!" she exclaimed, her usual analytical composure momentarily replaced by 12-year-old excitement. "The special program for exceptional youth? I can start advanced mathematics studies next semester." Amara embraced her daughter, the letter confirmation of what she'd always known. Zara's brilliance transcended conventional educational boundaries. Yet something else registered. Harvard meant Boston. They hadn't returned to the city since leaving it behind when Zara was an infant. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Amara said, maintaining her composure while her mind calculated implications. "We should visit the campus soon." Later that night, after Zara had gone to bed, Amara stood on her penthouse balcony, considering the symmetry of returning to Boston. Not as the desperate immigrant Michael had discarded, but as one of the business world's most powerful women. The thought wasn't about revenge. She had moved beyond such small emotions, but about completion, about closing a circle. Boston, she murmured to herself. We haven't been there since you were a baby. The following morning, Zara approached the subject with her characteristic directness. Is it because of my father? Is that why we've never gone back to Boston? Does he still live there? Amara considered her daughter's question carefully. Yes, he still lives there. And yes, that's part of why we haven't returned. Some chapters are better left closed. But now we have to go back for Harvard, Zara reasoned. Will we see him? That's entirely up to you, Amara replied, respecting her daughter's autonomy. If you want to meet him, I won't prevent it. That afternoon, Amara reserved the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton, Boston, her finger hovering momentarily before confirming the booking. A notification on her tablet drew her attention to an upcoming business event, the International Business Conference held annually at the Ritz-Carlton. The featured speakers included Boston's prominent business leaders, including Michael Thompson. Perhaps it's time we revisited our origins, Amara said quietly to herself, accepting the reservation. While planning her return to Boston, Amara didn't imagine that fate was preparing an encounter that would shake not just Michael Thompson's life, but would question everything she had built as protection against the past. While planning her return to Boston, Amara didn't imagine that fate was preparing an encounter that would shake not just Michael Thompson's life, but would question everything she had built as protection against the past. The private jet began its descent into Logan International Airport, and Amara felt her pulse quicken despite her carefully cultivated composure. Boston's familiar skyline emerged through wisps of cloud, the city both achingly familiar and strangely foreign after 15 years of absence. Beside her, Zara looked up from her advanced calculus textbook, curiosity lighting her intelligent eyes. That's the Prudential Center, Amara pointed, her voice steady despite the emotions churning beneath her professional veneer. And there, by the harbor, that's where I worked with Eleanor. Zara pressed her face to the window, absorbing the landscape of her birth city with analytical interest. It's beautiful. Why did we never come back before? Amara chose her words carefully. Sometimes places hold memories we need distance from until we're ready to face them. As the wheels touched down on Boston soil, Amara took a deliberate breath. She had returned not as the desperate immigrant fighting for survival, but as Amara Jenkins, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, dressed in a tailored Brunello Cucinelli suit that cost more than 6 months' rent of her former South End apartment. Ms. Jenkins, your car is waiting, the flight attendant announced as the jet taxied to a private hangar. The sleek black Maybach glided through Boston's streets, carrying them toward the Ritz-Carlton. Amara gazed out the window, her mind superimposing memories over the passing landscape. The bus stop where she'd waited in pre-dawn darkness, the clinic where she'd confirmed her pregnancy, the coffee shops where she'd studied between cleaning shifts. "Why are you so quiet, Mom?" Zara asked, her perceptiveness as sharp as ever. "Just remembering," Amara replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The Ritz-Carlton's staff greeted them with deferential efficiency, escorting them directly to the presidential suite without the formality of check-in. The two-bedroom suite, with its panoramic views of Boston Common, stood in stark contrast to the tiny apartment they'd once shared, a physical manifestation of how far they'd come. "This place is massive," Zara observed, exploring the suite with the same methodical curiosity she applied to mathematical problems. "Did we really used to live in a one-room apartment?" "We did," Amara confirmed, watching her daughter move confidently through the luxurious space, with a bathtub in the kitchen and radiators that clanked all night. After settling in, Amara found herself drawn to the window, gazing out at the city that had both broken and made her. "I need to attend to something," she told Zara. "Your Harvard interview isn't until tomorrow morning. Would you like to rest or explore the hotel?" "I'll review my application materials," Zara decided, already setting up her laptop at the suite's elegant desk. Alone in the hired car, Amara directed the driver through a city that had once been her battleground. Their first stop was Commonwealth Avenue, where she instructed the driver to idle briefly across from a particular Starbucks. Through the window, she could see customers lined up, oblivious to the significance this ordinary coffee shop held in her life. It was here that Michael had handed her a check, suggesting she solve the problem their child represented. Next came the Thompson Technologies building, less imposing than in her memories, its glass facade now somewhat dated compared to newer architectural innovations. Amara studied it dispassionately, noting the absence of the dynamic energy that characterized truly successful tech companies. "Continue to the south end," she instructed the driver, her voice betraying nothing of her inner turmoil. Her old apartment building had transformed completely. Gentrification had claimed the neighborhood, turning what had been barely affordable housing into luxury condominiums. The bodega where she'd bought discounted food was now an artisanal cheese shop. The laundromat where she'd studied while washing their clothes had become a boutique fitness studio. "The past truly is another country," Amara murmured to herself, directing the driver back toward the Ritz. The following morning, Zara's Harvard interview proceeded exactly as Amara had expected, with her daughter's extraordinary abilities leaving the admissions committee visibly impressed. The mathematics department chair himself had come to meet the prodigy whose entrance exam scores had broken department records. "Her understanding of complex analytical frameworks is unprecedented," he told Amara afterward, shaking his head in amazement. "And she speaks how many languages fluently?" "7 currently," Amara replied with quiet pride. "She's teaching herself Korean now, for fun." As they walked the historic campus, Amara pointed out landmarks from her own abbreviated academic career at UMass. "I used to study in that library sometimes when the heating in our apartment failed." Zara absorbed this information with the same attentiveness she gave everything. "Was it hard, being pregnant with me and trying to study?" "The hardest thing I've ever done," Amara admitted, "and the most worthwhile." Back at the hotel, a message awaited Amara. An invitation from the organizing committee of the International Business Conference. "We would be honored to have you as our keynote speaker," the note read. "Your insights on cross-cultural communication in global business would be invaluable to our attendees." Amara sat at the desk, turning the embossed invitation card between her fingers. She had deliberately avoided conferences in Boston for years, sending senior executives in her place. Now, fate seemed determined to engineer not just her return to the city, but her reintroduction to its business elite. Out of professional habit, she reviewed the list of other speakers and panelists attached to the invitation. Midway down the second page, a name jumped out: Michael Thompson, CEO, Thompson Technologies. The conference program noted he would be speaking about innovation in emerging markets, with emphasis on Middle Eastern partnerships. For a moment, Amara stared at the name, the familiar characters suddenly foreign on the page. It had been 15 years since she had spoken his name aloud, 15 years of building a life and an empire that had nothing to do with him. Now, their professional orbits were about to intersect in the very city where he had once dismissed her as nothing. Her phone rang. Eleanor Ellison, now 80 and ostensibly retired, though she remained Amara's most trusted advisor. "How does it feel to be back?" Eleanor asked without preamble. "Like visiting a movie set of a film I once watched," Amara replied. "Familiar, but not real." "And Harvard? Did they recognize Zara's brilliance?" "Immediately. She'll likely start the advanced program next semester." A pause, then Eleanor asked the question Amara had been expecting. "The conference invitation arrived, I assume. Are you ready to face him after all these years?" Amara gazed out at the Boston skyline, twilight painting the buildings in shades of gold and crimson. "This isn't about him," she answered finally. "It's about closing a chapter in my life." "And if Zara meets him? Have you considered that possibility?" The question hung in the air, pregnant with implications. "She's curious, naturally. I've never prohibited it, but I've never encouraged it either." "She has your intelligence and his determination," Eleanor observed. "A formidable combination." After the call ended, Amara found Zara sitting cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through the conference website on her tablet. "He's speaking at the same conference they've invited you to," Zara stated without looking up. "My biological father." Amara didn't bother asking how Zara had discovered this. Her daughter's investigative skills rivaled those of professional researchers. "Yes. Does that concern you?" Zara considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. "I'm curious. Genetically, he contributed 50% of my DNA. That's significant from a biological perspective." "From a biological perspective only," Amara clarified gently. "I understand that," Zara nodded. "You've explained that he chose not to be part of our lives. But now that we're here and he'll be at the same event—" She trailed off, uncharacteristically uncertain. Amara sat beside her daughter, careful not to influence her decision. "If you want to meet him, that's your choice to make. I won't stand in your way." Zara's analytical expression softened. "Does it hurt you, the thought of seeing him again?" "No," Amara answered truthfully. "That pain belonged to someone I used to be. I've built a life that has nothing to do with his rejection." Later that evening, Amara stood before the mirror in her suite, meticulously selecting her conference attire. The Chanel suit she chose was not just clothing but armor, its impeccable tailoring and subtle elegance a physical manifestation of how far she had come from the second-hand clothes of her cleaning days. "Perfect the presentation for tomorrow," she instructed her assistant via video call. "I want every slide flawless, every transition seamless." As she rehearsed her keynote, Cross-Cultural Communication in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, Amara infused each word with the authority she had earned through years of transforming her academic theories into billion-dollar realities. The nervous immigrant who had once cleaned offices after midnight had vanished, replaced by a woman whose mere presence commanded respect in boardrooms across 6 continents. In the adjoining room, Zara slept peacefully, unaware of the potential collision course their lives were on. Tomorrow would bring Harvard's formal acceptance into their advanced mathematics program, but it would also bring the conference, and with it, the man who had once deemed them both dispensable. Amara closed her presentation notes and gazed at her reflection, poised, powerful, prepared. This return to Boston wasn't about seeking validation or confronting ghosts. It was about demonstrating, primarily to herself, that the circle was complete. She had transcended not just poverty and abandonment, but the very limitations Michael had once assigned to her. While the night before the conference, adjusting her Chanel suit, Amara didn't know that her keynote would be merely the prelude to a public confrontation that would forever change not just her history with Michael, but the future of Thomson Technologies. While the night before the conference, adjusting her Chanel suit, Amara didn't know that her keynote would be merely the prelude to a public confrontation that would forever change not just her history with Michael, but the future of Thomson Technologies. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Ritz-Carlton suite as Amara applied her final touches of makeup with practiced precision. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, poised, polished, powerful, worlds away from the frightened cleaning girl who had once trembled before Michael Thomson. She selected diamond earrings that cost more than 6 months' rent of her former apartment, their weight a reminder of how far she had climbed. "Your car is ready, Ms. Jenkins," her assistant announced from the doorway. "The conference organizers have requested you arrive 30 minutes early for sound check and introductions." Amara nodded, her movements calm despite the flutter of anticipation in her chest. "Is Zara ready?" "Yes, she's in the living room reviewing your presentation notes. She's made some suggestions for your cultural algorithm slide." Of course she had. At 12, Zara's analytical mind routinely improved upon the work of Transcend's most brilliant engineers. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton had been transformed into a corporate amphitheater, with 500 of Boston's most influential business leaders already filling the rows of seats. Amara stood in the wings, listening to her introduction with detached interest as the conference chair listed her accomplishments. Revolutionized cross-cultural communication, built a multi-billion-dollar enterprise from nothing, and advises presidents and prime ministers on international relations. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Ms. Amara Jenkins. The applause washed over her as she stepped onto the stage, her Louboutin heels clicking purposefully across the polished wood. This was her element now, commanding attention, projecting authority. She took her position at the center, allowing 3 seconds of silence before speaking, a technique she had learned from Eleanor years ago. Control the room before you address it. Communication isn't about words, she began, her voice clear and confident. It's about understanding. In business, the difference between success and catastrophic failure often hinges not on what was said, but what was understood. For the next 40 minutes, Amara held the audience captive as she seamlessly wove between 6 different languages to illustrate cultural nuances in international business. She shared anecdotes of billion-dollar deals saved by cultural insight, demonstrated Transcend's revolutionary simultaneous translation system, and outlined her vision for AI-enhanced human communication. In the third row, Zara watched with quiet pride, occasionally glancing at her tablet to follow her mother's precisely timed presentation points. From her vantage point, she could also observe the reactions of the audience, the furious note-taking, the impressed whispers, the occasional awed expressions when Amara switched languages mid-sentence without breaking stride. The future belongs to those who understand that true communication transcends words, Amara concluded. At Transcend, we don't merely translate language, we translate meaning, because in the global marketplace, understanding isn't just beneficial, it's essential. The standing ovation was immediate and enthusiastic. CEOs and diplomats rose to their feet, applauding the woman who had redefined international business communication. Amara acknowledged them with a gracious nod, her expression composed despite the satisfaction surging through her veins. Somewhere in this room, perhaps, was Michael Thompson, watching as the disposable cleaning girl commanded the respect of everyone present. Backstage, conference organizers and business leaders surrounded her, competing for a moment of her attention. Amara navigated the crowd with diplomatic skill, allocating precisely the right amount of attention to each person while scanning the room for any sign of Michael. "Your keynote was magnificent," the conference chair gushed. "The next presentation begins in 30 minutes. Michael Thompson will discuss innovation in technological markets, focusing on partnerships with the Middle East." Amara maintained her pleasant expression while her mind calculated options. Her next commitment was a meeting with the Saudi investment group, the same one Michael was apparently courting for his company's survival. The rational choice would be to avoid his presentation entirely, but the Saudis had specifically mentioned they would be attending. "I'll be there," she replied smoothly. "The Middle Eastern markets are of particular interest to Transcend right now." During the coffee break, Amara deliberately positioned herself in conversation with European investors, her back to the entrance where attendees were returning for the next session. She selected a seat at the back of the ballroom, partially obscured by a decorative column, visible enough to observe, hidden enough to avoid immediate notice. The lights dimmed slightly as Michael Thompson was introduced. Amara's first glimpse of him in 15 years caused a curious detachment, as though she were observing a character from a half-forgotten film. At 42, Michael still carried himself with the confident posture of privilege, though time had etched lines around his eyes and threaded silver through his temples. His custom suit, Tom Ford, Amara noted automatically, hung perfectly on his frame but couldn't disguise the tension in his shoulders. "Thompson Technologies is honored to announce our expansion into the Saudi market," Michael began, his voice carrying the practiced charm that had once captivated a young Brazilian cleaner. "This contract of $500 million will represent our largest international operation to date." As he proceeded with his presentation, Amara's trained eye caught what others might miss: the slightly exaggerated projections, the carefully worded promises, the strategic omission of recent setbacks. Thomson Technologies wasn't expanding. It was desperately reaching for a lifeline. The Saudi deal wasn't a triumph, but a last-ditch effort to salvage a company hemorrhaging market share to more innovative competitors. Her phone vibrated with a text from Zara. His financial projections are statistically improbable. 68% of his market share claims are contradicted by public trading data. Amara suppressed a smile. Her daughter's analytical mind missed nothing. The presentation continued smoothly until Michael reached what was clearly intended as the centerpiece. And now I'd like to invite our Saudi partners to share their vision for this venture. 3 Saudi executives in traditional dress rose from the front row and made their way to the stage, accompanied by a translator in a Western suit. Michael smiled confidently, but his expression faltered when the translator leaned close and whispered something in his ear. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael announced, visible discomfort crossing his features, "it seems we have a small setback. Our lead translator is experiencing a family emergency and cannot continue. We're attempting to locate a substitute who speaks Arabic fluently." The Saudi businessmen, known throughout the industry for their limited patience with unprofessionalism, began exchanging dissatisfied glances. The eldest, Prince Al Faisal, whose investment fund controlled billions in international capital, checked his watch with deliberate emphasis. "Does anyone in this room speak fluent Arabic?" Michael asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "This is an emergency situation." The silence that followed was deafening. Hundreds of executives avoided eye contact with the struggling presenter while the Saudi delegation began gathering their materials, clearly preparing to exit. Amara could see Michael's future collapsing in real time. Without this presentation, without this deal, Thomson Technologies would likely not survive another quarter. She could have remained invisible, could have watched from her shadowed seat as Michael's company imploded. Instead, Amara rose to her feet. "I speak Arabic," she stated clearly, her voice carrying through the silent room. All eyes turned toward her as she walked with measured grace down the center aisle. The Saudi executives recognized her immediately. Transcend's reputation in Middle Eastern business circles was legendary, and she had personally negotiated contracts with their royal family members. Michael, focused on salvaging his presentation, didn't recognize her until she reached the steps to the stage. When their eyes finally met, the color drained from his face so rapidly that for a moment Amara thought he might faint. "Amara?" The name escaped his lips as a whispered question. She ignored him completely, turning instead to the Saudi delegation with a professional smile. In perfect Arabic, she introduced herself and apologized for the inconvenience. The men smiled, visibly relieved by her presence. "Al-Salamu alaykum, Your Highness," she addressed Prince Al-Faisal with the precise honorific his position demanded. "I would be honored to assist with translation if you find it acceptable." "Ms. Jenkins," the prince replied warmly in Arabic, "your reputation precedes you. Your assistance would be most welcome." For the next 20 minutes, Amara translated flawlessly, standing beside a visibly shaken Michael who struggled to maintain his composure. Each time she spoke, her confident, professional voice contrasted painfully with his memory of the desperate young woman he had discarded. She improved his vague promises with diplomatic phrasing, clarified his technical explanations with precision, and occasionally added cultural context that saved him from potential offense. The Saudis directed their questions primarily to Amara, often speaking in rapid Arabic that excluded Michael entirely from portions of the conversation. At one point, Prince Al-Faisal commented in Arabic, loud enough for nearby Arabic speakers to hear, "We should be doing business with your company, not with this one." When the presentation concluded, the Saudi executives applauded enthusiastically, thanking Amara profusely in Arabic. They exited the stage in a tight group, leaving Michael and Amara momentarily alone as the audience dispersed for the scheduled coffee break. "Thank you," Michael managed, struggling to regain his composure. "You saved my presentation." "I didn't do it for you," Amara replied coolly. "I respect the Saudis too much to leave them without translation." "You look different." Michael attempted a smile, his eyes taking in her transformation. "It seems you've done well for yourself." "Contrary to your predictions, isn't it?" Amara maintained a professional tone, but her eyes were ice. "I should go. I have my own meeting with the Saudis in 10 minutes. At that moment, Zara entered the nearly empty ballroom, approaching the stage with purposeful steps. "Mom, Mr. Al-Faisal is looking for you." Michael froze at the sight of Zara, the living reflection of himself at 14, with Amara's almond-shaped eyes and analytical gaze. "I'll be right there, sweetheart," Amara responded. "Zara, this is an old acquaintance, Michael Thompson." Zara extended her hand politely. "Pleased to meet you, sir." Michael was visibly stunned, staring at the girl as recognition dawned. "She's my daughter," Amara cut in. "Recently accepted to Harvard at 14, advanced mathematics program." "Our daughter," he whispered. "No," Amara corrected firmly. "My daughter. You abdicated any rights 15 years ago in a Starbucks." Zara observed the interaction with obvious curiosity, her intelligent eyes capturing the tension. "We need to go," Amara concluded, touching Zara's shoulder. "The Saudis are waiting to finalize our exclusivity contract." "Exclusivity?" Michael paled visibly. "But my contract—" "Business is business," Amara replied. "Perhaps some people truly are born to lead and others to serve, as you said. You just didn't correctly predict who would be who." As the mother and daughter walked away, leaving Michael alone on the stage, neither noticed how the saloon doors at the back of the ballroom swung slightly, or how a young teenager with penetrating familiar eyes lingered there, watching the scene unfold with calculating interest. As the mother and daughter walked away, leaving Michael alone on the stage, the full weight of what had just happened began to sink in. Michael stared at their retreating figures, his mind struggling to process the encounter. Amara, the cleaner he had dismissed 15 years ago, had returned as a powerhouse executive, and that girl, his daughter, now walked beside her mother with the same confidence he had once prided himself on possessing. The backstage area had emptied quickly, everyone moving to the coffee break or networking in the hallways. Michael remained frozen, his presentation materials forgotten on the podium. The Saudi investors, his company's last hope, were now following Amara Jenkins, pursuing an exclusivity agreement that would effectively end Thompson Technologies' chances of survival. Gathering his composure with visible effort, Michael straightened his Italian silk tie and collected his presentation materials with trembling hands. He needed to salvage this somehow. 15 years of building his company couldn't end like this, not because of a woman he'd once considered disposable. Meanwhile, in a private meeting room adjacent to the main conference hall, Amara stood before the Saudi delegation, her posture relaxed but commanding. Unlike Michael's desperate presentation, she spoke with the quiet confidence of someone offering an opportunity rather than begging for rescue. Transcend's cultural contextual algorithms have reduced miscommunication in diplomatic translations by 78%, she explained in fluent Arabic, her tone conversational rather than pushy. For sensitive negotiations like those your government conducts regularly, this isn't merely an improvement, it's a fundamental shift in reliability. Prince Al-Faisal nodded appreciatively. Your reputation for cultural precision is well established, Ms. Jenkins, but I must ask, what was that rather uncomfortable scene we witnessed? You know Mr. Thompson personally? Amara maintained her professional demeanor despite the personal question. We crossed paths many years ago before Transcend existed. It's ancient history. History has ways of repeating itself, the prince observed shrewdly. He seemed quite shocked to see you. I imagine he was more shocked by my Arabic fluency, Amara replied diplomatically, redirecting the conversation. Now, regarding the exclusivity clause in Section 4. For the next 30 minutes, Amara guided the conversation with practiced ease, addressing technical questions and negotiating terms that would make Transcend the sole provider of linguistic services for all Saudi government communications and major businesses within the kingdom. The deal, worth over $800 million, would effectively lock Thomson Technologies out of the Middle Eastern market entirely. As the meeting concluded, Prince Al Faisal signed the preliminary agreement with a flourish. "Your company's services are unmatched, Ms. Jenkins. We look forward to a productive partnership." "Transcend values this opportunity," Amara responded, the formal words masking the triumph she felt. Not personal vindication, she had moved beyond needing that, but professional satisfaction at securing a landmark contract. As the Saudi delegation departed, Zara, who had been quietly observing from a corner seat, approached her mother. "That was masterful negotiation, Mom. You anticipated each of their concerns before they raised them." Amara smiled at her daughter. "Cultural awareness is as important as the words themselves. That's something Thomson Technologies never understood." The mention of the name hung briefly in the air between them. Zara's analytical mind had clearly been processing the earlier encounter. "He's my biological father, isn't he?" she asked directly. Not a question, really. More a confirmation of what she had already deduced. Amara nodded, respecting her daughter's intelligence too much to prevaricate. "Yes, I wasn't planning for you to meet him like this." "His facial expression when he saw you was fascinating," Zara observed with scientific detachment. Pupil dilation, micro-expressions of shock, followed by what appeared to be shame. Classic recognition response pattern. Amara sometimes forgot that her daughter processed emotional situations through her analytical framework, not from lack of feeling but as her method of understanding complex human interactions. "His company is failing," Zara continued matter-of-factly. "The Saudi contract was clearly a last-ditch effort to remain solvent. You've effectively secured its demise by signing an exclusivity agreement." "Business is business," Amara replied, echoing her earlier words to Michael. "The better service won." Before Zara could respond, there was a knock at the meeting room door. Amara's assistant entered, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Ms. Jenkins, Mr. Thompson is requesting 5 minutes of your time. He's quite insistent." Amara considered refusing, but something, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a desire for closure, made her nod. "Tell him he has 2 minutes. I'll meet him in the executive lounge." The executive lounge was mercifully empty, most conference attendees still engaged in the main hall sessions. Michael was waiting, his earlier confidence replaced by barely concealed desperation. His perfect suit now seemed to hang on him awkwardly, as though he had somehow diminished physically in the hour since his presentation. "Thank you for seeing me," he began, his voice betraying tension despite his attempt at professional composure. Amara remained standing, making it clear this would indeed be brief. 2 minutes, Michael. What do you want?" "I need your help," he said, the words clearly painful for him to articulate. "The Saudis were our only hope. The company is drowning in debt." "And how can I help?" Amara asked, checking her platinum watch, a deliberate reminder of time's value. "Intercede for me. Tell them we can work together. Share the contract." The desperation in his voice was undisguised now. "Business doesn't work that way, Michael. You should know that." Her tone was not cruel, simply matter-of-fact. "I have a daughter," he exclaimed, emotion breaking through his business facade. "A daughter I never knew. Don't I deserve a second chance?" Amara regarded him thoughtfully. "As a businesswoman or as a mother?" "Both," he pleaded. "As a businesswoman, I'd say you lost an opportunity because you failed to do proper due diligence. As a mother," Amara paused, choosing her words carefully. "There is no second chance for 15 years of absence." In the lobby beyond the lounge, reporters from the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg were interviewing the Saudi delegation about their new partnership with Transcend. a Fortune magazine journalist approached Amara's assistant, requesting an exclusive interview for their next cover, "The Visionary Who Revolutionized Global Communications." Michael lowered his voice, stepping closer. "Please, Amara, I'm about to lose everything. The company, my reputation. When I was about to lose everything, my visa, my scholarship, my future, you offered me $10,000 to disappear," Amara replied, her voice steady. "I'm offering you something more valuable, the truth. You built a company without solid foundations, just as you built your life." The words landed like precise surgical strikes, cutting through Michael's remaining defenses. He stood speechless, confronted not with anger or vengeance, but with clear-eyed assessment of his failures, both professional and personal. "Your 2 minutes are up," Amara said quietly. "I have a press conference to attend." That evening, the conference gala dinner filled the Ritz-Carlton's grand ballroom with Boston's business elite. Amara and Zara were seated at the main table with the Saudi dignitaries, while Michael had been relegated to a peripheral table, a physical manifestation of his company's diminished status. During dinner, the conference chair approached the podium to present the Global Leadership Award to Amara Jenkins. The spotlight found her as she rose gracefully, accepting the crystal trophy to enthusiastic applause. "15 years ago, I cleaned offices at night in Boston, pregnant and alone," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Someone told me I would never be more than an immigrant cleaner." She paused meaningfully, not looking toward Michael's table. Today, that cleaner employs over 4,000 people, including 200 PhDs, and advises the White House on intercultural communications. The applause was thunderous. From his isolated table, Michael remained motionless, the words striking him with the force of physical blows. Each of Amara's achievements stood as a direct refutation of his cruel dismissal 15 years earlier. The woman he had deemed dispensable now commanded the respect of everyone in the room, including those who had once been his most reliable business allies. After the dinner concluded, Amara and Zara returned to their suite, both processing the day's events in their own way. Zara was uncharacteristically quiet, her brilliant mind clearly working through complex emotional equations. "Are you okay?" Amara asked gently. "I'm calculating probabilities," Zara replied. "Specifically, the likelihood that he'll attempt further contact." "And your conclusion?" 97% probability, Zara stated with mathematical certainty. His facial expressions displayed classic paternal recognition patterns. Plus, his company needs a miracle, and you currently control access to its potential salvation. Amara smiled at her daughter's unique perspective. "And how would you feel about that contact if it happens?" Zara considered the question with her usual thoroughness. "I'm undecided. Genetically, he's half responsible for my existence. Logically, that merits at least preliminary data gathering. In other words, you might want to meet him," Amara translated. "Perhaps," Zara acknowledged. "Would that hurt you?" Amara shook her head. "Your choices are your own, Zara. I won't let my past dictate your future." The following morning, before checking out of the hotel, Amara found Michael waiting in the lobby. His appearance had deteriorated overnight, his clothes slightly rumpled, dark circles beneath his eyes suggesting sleeplessness. He straightened when he saw her approach. "I can't just let you go again," he declared with a hint of his former confidence. "I want to know my daughter." "That's not up to me," Amara replied evenly. "Zara is 14, intelligent enough to make her own decisions. Have you told her about me? That you chose not to be part of our lives? Yes. The cruel details? No. I preserved your image, not for you, but for her." "Thank you for that, at least," he said softly. "Don't thank me. I overcame you long ago, Michael. I don't carry anger, just indifference." At that moment, Zara approached, her perceptive gaze taking in the tension between the adults. As always, she went straight to the heart of the matter. "You're my biological father, aren't you?" she asked Michael directly. He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "Yes. and I'd very much like to get to know you, if you'll allow it." Zara studied him with the analytical gaze she had inherited from her mother. "Perhaps someday. Right now I need to focus on Harvard and the International Mathematics Championship. We could exchange emails to start." Michael agreed, grateful for even this small opening. As Amara and Zara entered the limousine that would take them to the airport, Michael watched the woman who might have been his life partner, now a global force who had absolutely no need for him. "What do you think of him?" Amara asked Zara as the car pulled away. "He seems small," the teenager replied after reflection. "Not physically, but as a person, like someone who let fear limit his possibilities." Amara smiled, proud of her daughter's wisdom. On her tablet, she reviewed the final offer to acquire Thomson Technologies for a fraction of its previous value, a proposal that Michael's board would certainly pressure him to accept next week. "Shall we go home?" Zara asked. "Yes," Amara answered, looking one last time at Boston through the window. "Our journey here is complete." While the Transcend private jet took off, Michael Thompson remained in the hotel lobby holding the card with Zara's email, finally understanding the value of what he had discarded 15 years ago. Not just a family, but a partnership that could have transformed his life and business. While the Transcend private jet took off, Michael Thompson remained in the hotel lobby, holding the card with Zara's email, finally understanding the value of what he had discarded 15 years ago. Not just a family, but a partnership that could have transformed his life and business. The following morning, Boston's financial district buzzed with activity as traders and analysts responded to the overnight news. Headlines across Bloomberg terminals and financial websites announced the impending collapse of Thomson Technologies after the lost Saudi contract. Shares plummeted 27% in pre-market trading, with analysts predicting further decline once markets officially opened. In her Manhattan penthouse, Amara reviewed these developments on her tablet while preparing Zara's favorite breakfast of acai bowls with fresh berries, a small tradition they maintained regardless of their busy schedules. The teenager entered the kitchen dressed in Harvard's crimson sweatshirt, her expression thoughtful. "The business channels are predicting Thomson Technologies won't survive the quarter," Zara observed, nodding toward the muted financial news playing on the kitchen's wall screen. "Their stock is in free fall." Amara placed the bowl before her daughter. Markets react quickly to lost opportunities. The Saudi contract represented nearly 60% of their projected revenue for the next fiscal year. "Was that the intended outcome of our Boston trip?" Zara asked, her analytical mind always seeking patterns and motivations. "No," Amara answered truthfully. "I went to Boston for your Harvard interview and to close a chapter of my life. Business consequences were inevitable but not my primary objective." Zara nodded, processing this information while methodically arranging her berries in perfect symmetry before eating. "I'd like to talk about Michael Thompson." The request didn't surprise Amara. Since returning from Boston 3 days earlier, she had been waiting for Zara to process the encounter in her own way, at her own pace. "Of course. I need to understand exactly what happened between you," Zara said, her tone suggesting this was a necessary data point for her internal calculations. "Not just the outline you've provided before, but the complete scenario." Amara set down her coffee cup. This moment required her full attention. "Are you sure? Some details aren't pleasant. I've calculated that understanding the complete truth will be more beneficial to my psychological development than protective omissions," Zara replied with her characteristic blend of emotional insight and analytical framing. In the sunlit kitchen overlooking Central Park, Amara shared the complete story. The young Brazilian immigrant cleaning offices while studying, the powerful CEO who found her insights interesting, the relationship that developed despite his warnings about different worlds, and finally, the brutal rejection in the Starbucks when she revealed her pregnancy. He said, "Some people are born to serve, others to lead. You would never be enough for the world I'm building," Amara recounted, the words still precise in her memory despite the years. Then he wrote a check for $10,000 to solve the problem. Zara's expression remained thoughtful, though Amara noticed her daughter's hands tightening slightly around her spoon, a rare physical manifestation of emotion. He viewed me as a problem to be eliminated. Yes, Amara confirmed, not softening the truth. And when I refused the money, he said, "You clean offices at night and can barely afford your rent. What do you have to offer a child?" "Yet here we are," Zara observed, gesturing to their surroundings. The Manhattan penthouse with its museum-quality art and views commanding $20 million. His assessment was fundamentally flawed. His assessment was based on viewing people as fixed points rather than vectors, Amara explained. He couldn't conceive that someone in my position could create a different future. Zara considered this, her brilliant mind processing the implications. He mistook current circumstances for future potential, a significant analytical error. The most common error powerful people make, Amara agreed. They confuse the advantages they were given with inherent superiority. After breakfast, as Zara prepared for her online advanced mathematics seminar, Amara received an alert from her chief financial officer. Thomson Technologies board had called an emergency meeting. Market analysts were predicting a vote on whether to seek acquisition offers before the company's value deteriorated further. Later that afternoon, while reviewing quarterly projections in her office at Transcend headquarters, Amara received a message that Zara had arrived unexpectedly. This was unusual. Her daughter typically remained at home with her tutors during school hours. "I've made a decision," Zara announced without preamble as she entered the office. "I would like 5 minutes with Michael Thompson before we return to New York permanently." Amara studied her daughter's determined expression, so like her own when making difficult choices. "May I ask why?" "I need to look him in the eyes and form my own assessment," Zara explained. "The data is incomplete without direct observation." "And you're certain this is what you want?" Amara asked carefully. "Yes. I've calculated all potential emotional outcomes. This provides the optimal path to psychological closure." Amara nodded, respecting her daughter's agency. "I'll arrange it." The following morning, Michael Thompson paced nervously in the lobby of the Four Seasons Boston, where Amara had arranged the meeting. His appearance reflected his company's decline, his suit still expensive but slightly rumpled, dark circles beneath his eyes betraying sleepless nights spent attempting to salvage what remained of Thomson Technologies. When the elevator doors opened revealing Zara, alone, Michael straightened, attempting to project confidence he clearly no longer felt. Amara watched from a discreet distance across the lobby, allowing her daughter this moment while remaining within sight. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," Michael began awkwardly as Zara approached. "This meeting serves my purposes as well," the girl replied with characteristic directness. "I have questions that require answers." They sat in a quiet corner of the lobby, Michael perched uncomfortably on the edge of his seat while Zara maintained perfect posture, her analytical gaze never leaving his face. "I'd like to explain about the past," Michael started. "I was young, arrogant, frightened. I didn't realize what I was throwing away." "Your chronological age at the time was 26, Zara noted precisely. "Well within the range of adult decision-making capacity. Your choices defined who you are. My mother's choices defined who I am." Michael flinched slightly at the clinical assessment. "I've made terrible mistakes. I'm hoping there might be a chance to know you now." "That possibility exists," Zara acknowledged. "However, relationship development requires time and demonstrated value. We can exchange emails. Perhaps someday I'll be ready for more." The scientific approach to what most would consider an emotional situation seemed to both confuse and fascinate Michael. "You're extraordinary," he observed softly. "Just like your mother. Statistically, I express traits from both genetic contributors," Zara replied. "Your mathematical aptitude combined with her linguistic gifts and determination." She stood, signaling the end of their allotted time. "I've gathered sufficient data for preliminary assessment." Across the lobby, Amara was engaged in conversation with her vice president of acquisitions, who had arrived with time-sensitive documents requiring her signature. "The offer for Thompson Technologies is prepared," he explained quietly, opening a digital portfolio. "Their board is meeting this afternoon to review acquisition proposals. At the current valuation, we can acquire them for approximately 8 cents on the dollar compared to their peak value 3 years ago." Amara reviewed the figures thoughtfully. "Their core technology still has value, particularly their natural language processing patents." "This isn't about revenge, is it?" her VP asked carefully. "No," Amara replied, watching as Zara concluded her conversation with Michael. "It's about completing a cycle and moving forward. The acquisition makes strategic sense regardless of personal history." With a decisive gesture, she applied her digital signature to the offer. "Submit this to their board before their 3 o'clock meeting." As Zara rejoined her mother, Michael remained seated, watching them with an expression of profound loss. In his hand, he clutched the business card with Zara's email address, his tenuous connection to the daughter he'd never known and the empire he might have shared. "What did you conclude?" Amara asked as they walked toward the hotel exit. "His choices created cascading failures, personal and professional," Zara observed. "There's a certain mathematical elegance to how his rejection of us ultimately led to his company's vulnerability to our acquisition." Amara smiled at her daughter's unique perspective. Life often contains such symmetries. Outside, their driver held the door to the waiting Mercedes. Boston's skyline stretched before them, the same city where Amara had once cleaned offices at midnight, pregnant and alone, dreaming of a future that seemed impossible. "Harvard begins next semester," Zara noted as they settled into the car. "Will we be returning to Boston then?" "Yes, but differently," Amara replied. "I'm considering opening Transcend's East Coast headquarters here." "Strategic business decision or personal symbolism?" Zara asked perceptively. "Both," Amara admitted. "The most satisfying decisions often serve multiple purposes." As their car pulled away, Michael Thompson emerged from the hotel entrance, watching the departing vehicle with the stunned expression of a man finally comprehending the magnitude of his loss. Not just the family he had rejected, but the vision he had failed to recognize, the partnership that might have transformed his legacy. Later that afternoon, as their private jet soared above the clouds, Amara received confirmation. Thompson Technologies' board had unanimously approved Transcend's acquisition offer. The company that had once deemed her disposable was now merely another asset in her diversified portfolio. "Did we just buy his company?" Zara asked, looking up from her quantum physics textbook. "Yes," Amara confirmed. "Their technology complements our existing systems." Zara nodded, returning to her studies with characteristic focus. For her, this was simply another data point in the elegant equation of justice that had been resolving itself since before her birth. While the Transcend jet headed toward New York, Michael Thompson sat alone in the Thompson Technologies boardroom, holding the card with Zara's email address, his only remaining connection to the family he had rejected, and the empire that might have been his, now just another acquisition in the portfolio of the woman he had once called dispensable. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.